Hello and welcome to the second segment with Daniel Tatman. We are talking about architecture, of course, and geomancy and a whole lot more. And let's continue now, Dan, and talk a little bit more about different architectural styles. And basically, how we can frame it in the context of how this is connected with the symbolism that we equate to Greece, Egypt, going down to the Freemasonic tradition, but also the tradition of the Hebrews. Tell us a little bit about that, Dan.
Sure. Well, one thing that we can see straight away from just looking around our world, we can see that all of the courthouses and main municipal buildings and things are mostly done on a rectangular floor plan. And especially courts and Masonic lodges are always done within this certain rectangular form. Also with the altar and the other people that will be participating in that ritual, whether it be the law ritual or the Masonic ritual.
Yes.
The actual places where they're sitting within this rectangular kind of form of the building. In all of the modern places that we're talking about, it's the same proportion, ratio, and kind of sacred geometric value that we see also in Jewish temples.
Mm.
And also, we can go back even further than that, because we have obviously an account of the proportions and size of the Temple of Solomon from the Bible.
Yes.
And the floor plan, again, is exactly the same. So we have the Masonic lodge system, we have the Jewish temples,
synagogues, yes.
The synagogues and the Temple of Solomon, all showing us the same geometry. And the key thing with that is that it goes from the kind of the Freemasonic line through their kind of connected traditions.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we can see in Masonic symbolism that we've got heavy use of Egyptian symbolism and also of Judaic symbolism. So that's a real sort of obvious connection that we can see anyway. But then, obviously, as we said, it works on an architectural level. And we can even take it back to Greece as well, because the Parthenon and other temples like this are kind of the most ideal kind of version of the Palladian style of architecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this, again, the Parthenon is exactly the same as the Temple of Solomon. The actual ratio of the front, the facade, and of the whole entire inside floor plan as well. So yeah, you have the front of the Parthenon, the pediment, which is stuck on front, on top of the front of the facade. The actual size, the height, which the center, the kind of the apex of this pediment at the front of this triangle, where that will reach to, the actual geometry that it creates is exactly the same as the front of the Temple of Solomon. It's kind of a square within a rectangle.
Yes.
On the front. And so, yeah, we can see this very, very clear connection on an architectural level, but we can also see it on a symbolic level. If we take the symbol which I've been talking about, the Masonic cornerstone marking,
yes,
it has, as we've talked about, lots of different levels of information which you can take from it. And even on a symbolic level, what the Masonic symbol is showing is that it's actually the same symbol as the Ankh of the Egyptians, and it's actually the same symbol as the caduceus. But with with both of these transmutations, what's being done is actually the energetic circuit of the symbol has been changed, has been inverted and flipped around. So where you would have the loop on top of the T of an Ankh,
mm-hmm.
If you imagine actually cutting a little line right at the top of this loop in the middle,
yeah,
and folding the lines around, so you're inverting them away from their original part of the symbol,
mm-hmm.
and you pull these lines the furthest they can be away from their original position within the actual geometry of the symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, then you have exactly the same as the Masonic cornerstone marking.
Yes, yes, I see what you mean.
So, I mean, what we can see here on a symbolic level is that they've actually destroyed the female and integrated it into the male. So at the same time as unbalancing the female energy of the symbol, they've unbalanced the male because it's top-heavy male symbolism. And then again, we see this in the caduceus, because the caduceus, obviously, it has the two snakes, which we could equate with the male and the female, and electricity and magnetism, and creating this divine circuit. And obviously they are around a rod, and at the top of the rod we have the wings coming from it, which is connected to the kundalini and the third eye.
Yes.
And obviously this is a connection to the Ankh as well, on a higher level. But what we have with the caduceus, if you can imagine seeing this rod with the wings actually in front of you, and you were to uncoil the snakes around the rod from their tails.
From the bottom.
From the bottom, from their tail.
Yes.
You leave their mouth attached to the top, but you unwind their bodies, and then you pull the snake, again, the same as the Ankh. You pull it as far away as it can be from its original geometry. And again, what you have is the Masonic cornerstone marking.
The same symbol,
the wings and the top of the rod that forms the flat line, and the two snakes then pulled away from the pole as far as they can be, and here's the key, separated away from the symbol, and it actually again mirrors exactly the same as this Masonic cornerstone marking.
Yes.
And again, another level to this, and this is something that, as far as I know, hasn't been talked about at all, is that we find within the Western medical practice and paramedics. We've all seen the symbol all around the world. They have it, a kind of a Star of David symbol almost, but squared off. So each part of it, which you usually have the point, is made into a square, and it has the rod in the middle of it, with just one snake going around this rod. And if you look at this symbol, the snake that you actually have is the snake's head comes up to the left of the rod. So they're utilizing quite blatantly in their symbolism just this left-hand path, just the male path.
Yes.
With the actual medical industry. But then on the flip side of this, and here's a real key, is that if you look at the symbols of pharmacy, and obviously the pharmacy is where they make the medicines to be applied. The symbol of a pharmacy worldwide is a chalice or a glass with a snake wrapped around it, but with the head coming round to the right. So we have this separation in the modern world of the caduceus and keeping them separate. And again, this is what we see if we deface the Ankh, and if we deface the caduceus, as I said, we get the Masonic cornerstone marking. And that quite clearly says on a symbolic level is of knowledge of all of this, but keeping these things separate, keeping the male and the female separate. And obviously in the outer world, that's taken the level of keeping the medical department separate from the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
And so it's very interesting, the interplay that we have then between these two. But I'd say that just the symbolism really proves this out. If you actually were to draw these symbols and do what I'm saying, you'll see that this is quite a clear connection. And this is being used many times, as we talked about the law of resonance. This is to do with entraining symbols and entraining ideas with things which are similar. So things which parallel each other, you can almost use them instead of each other. And the alchemists and a lot of these esoteric researchers and students over the years did this, and they made these huge tables of equivalence. So they would have all of the star signs and all of these different metals and all of these other tables of things which would be equivalent to the other.
Yes.
And so we can see that this was a definite technique which was used by the later mystery schools. If we could say that from the caduceus is the last point that we actually see in symbology of these two snakes connected, kind of an empire or a civilization role, because, as I said, after that point they're separated. But it's quite clearly saying with our medical industry that it's connected to the caduceus.
Yes.
But it's the separation of the two again, as I said. And it's very clear that this was used by very many people that were into the occult. They would use direct ciphers, what we know as ciphers, which would have been literally changing values, and you could input into a little piece of writing a cipher, a hidden code. But then there was also another way of encoding things, which is called steganography.
Right.
This is the name that we have for it now. And this is to do with, instead of hiding detail within the content, you hide it within the presentation. And this is, again, something which the alchemists were very big on. So they could just put a few cryptic symbols just around the page or around the front of a leaflet.
Yeah.
And that would be communicating a lot of different ideas to members of their group. So, we can see this on a load of different levels, that this is the case, that older symbols were taken, that they were revamped and changed based on the intent of the user.
Yes, yes.
And as we've talked about with male dominance in politics and everything in world affairs, going right up to architecture and geomancy, that's what's happened from this period. Perhaps we're going the in-between period between Egypt and Greece, but there was something very definite that happened at this point.
Yes.
Where inspiration came in.
You think there was a hijacking of sorts taking place, or because it could be related to something happening within the psyche of the empire builders, if you will, but it feels to be more kind of subtle and more kind of basically as someone taking over how to rule society in a way.
Yeah, precisely. I think that this knowledge was known by a lot of people, but I think from this period, strangely, it may coincide with the exodus of the Hyksos and possible ideas about this Pharaoh Akhenaten.
Yes.
And other kind of interesting solar worshipping kings which came around this period. We can see that there was, as you say, possibly you could say hijacking, or a handover of power. A new group came in, and they wanted to carry on using the same science because they had the knowledge of it, and they understood how important it was for life itself and for an empire or a civilization to continue. That they wanted to clothe that in their own intent, and so a handover seems to have what was the case.
And these are very
continuation, but availing.
And these are very one-sided personalities, so to speak, also as well, because they might recognize that one aspect is evil or not good in that sense. So they're all about monotheism. In that sense, is can be reflected in that this is only about one god or one element or one property, so to speak. Yeah,
and usually a male god.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's the key thing with symbolism and with the kind of the adaptation of the symbolism over time, because obviously the caduceus and the ankh both meant the same thing.
Yes.
They were both the balance of male and female and the connection to the pineal gland. And so, we can see that this was just a subjugation of that and a veiled version which got carried on being used. And we pick it up, really, geomancy in conventional terms again from, we say, these medieval occultists who were writing about astrological geomancy and were writing about lots of these ciphers and the kind of the overall effect on consciousness that different shapes, forms, colours, sounds, metals had.
Yes. And I guess we can tie this together